Hello everybody, and welcome back to another review of IMDb's Top 50 Greatest Films of All Time. Today we are discussing The Silence of the Lambs. Came out in 1991, is directed by Jonathan Demme. It stars Jodie Foster, Anthony Hopkins, Scott Glenn, and Ted Levine. And it was hugely successful at the box office, as well as with critics. Most of them loved it, as did the Academy. It won 5 Academy Awards, and I believe was nominated for more. So, let's talk about it. If you haven't already heard what the film is about, or haven't already seen it, in which case get on that. The plot is Clarice Starling, who is played by Jodie Foster, is an FBI trainee who is tasked with interviewing Dr. Hannibal Lecter, an incarcerated serial killer played by Anthony Hopkins, hoping that he can help the FBI catch another killer, nicknamed Buffalo Bill, who's played by Ted Levine, for how he skins his victims. Already, it is a dark, dark film. It deals with serial killers, different styles of serial killing. Buffalo Bill, he skins his victims. Hannibal Lecter is nicknamed Hannibal the Cannibal because he eats people. The interesting thing about Hannibal Lecter is he is an accomplished psychiatrist, hence Dr. Hannibal Lecter. He is very good at getting inside people's heads, and there are some really cool scenes involving Foster and Hopkins and the mind games that their characters play with each other. Starling wants information. Hopkins, Hannibal Lecter, he has this information, but he's not willing to give it up so easily. He wants certain things, and he's smart enough that he knows how to manipulate this young woman into getting them and achieving his own goals. Maybe he wants escape. Maybe he's telling the truth. He just wants to be moved to a nicer jail cell. Who knows? He is a very fascinating character, one of the best ever put on screen. This is Anthony Hopkins' best performance for sure. He does a great job playing this guy who is completely crazy but also painfully sane. He knows what he's doing. There's a scene where the head doctor at the institution where Lecter is incarcerated is speaking with Clarice Starling for the first time. He talks about how he once complained of stomach pain, and he was moved, to the infirmary, and they took off his face mask because whenever they transport him, he has to wear a face mask with metal bars going over the slot for his mouth so he can't bite anyone. They removed that, and a nurse went to check, and when he bit out her tongue, he says that his pulse didn't go above 85 beats per minute. So he's very calm, very collected, knows exactly what he's doing, and he is in your head from the get-go. He does a fantastic job, and is, in my opinion, the best part of this movie. One very interesting thing, he is only on screen for 16 minutes of the entire 2 hours that this film is running. So the greatest character, or one of the greatest characters, one of the greatest villains ever portrayed on screen is only seen for 16 minutes. Now that's not to say that there are only 16 minutes of film that have scenes with him in them. So, for an example, one of the conversations between Clarice and Dr. Lecter, Clarice will be talking about something, talking to Dr. Lecter, but it will be showing her face, so that doesn't count. His presence is still felt throughout these scenes. You know that he's there, and he's the one that you're really paying attention to. You know how dangerous he is, and Jonathan Demme does a great job of showing how, evil this guy is, and how great Hopkins' performance is. Jonathan Demme directed him very well through this film. He won an Oscar for Best Actor, and that's really all I have to say about him. He does such a good job. Jodie Foster also winning Best Actress for her role in this film. She actually got her start in another very well-regarded film, Taxi Driver, from 1976, directed by Martin Scorsese. That's where she got her start, and she later came on to do this, where she won an Oscar. Her performance is excellent for what she's given. She's an interesting character, but she's nowhere near the same level as Hannibal Lecter. So he steals every scene that he's in, but she is in most of the scenes, and she does a phenomenal job. She's great in this movie. I don't mean to sound like I'm knocking her performance at all. It's just Anthony Hopkins gives one of the greatest performances in the history of cinema, and I'm talking like Jack Nicholson in The Shining levels of quality acting. This is some of the best that you will ever see. He is great, especially his introduction, his scene. Wonderful. I don't want to spoil anything more because you really should see this for yourself. One thing I want to say is that I have been hearing the title of this film for a while before I actually saw it a few years ago, and I had always been under the impression that it was a horror movie. I had never really seen a horror movie, and I still can't recall like a real horror movie I sat down and watched. I know way back when it came out, Insidious 2 really scared me. I went to go see that with two of my friends, and it's actually pretty good. I think James Wan is a fine director. He's probably the best working horror director today. But this is not a horror film at all, so don't go into it thinking that. It is a thriller, first and foremost. It is trying to be thrilling. It is painfully suspenseful. And that is what makes it so great. It is really, really good at building suspense. Jonathan Demme does a great job with the way that he's filming, the way that the camera is, panning down this hallway of prison cells, eventually building to the reveal of Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter, whether it's a really effective use of POV shots to build suspense, Just overall, very well directed, very good at proving this, or really not proving, but just bringing across this point that this is a very tense situation. It's a very intense movie, and it is very suspenseful. You will be on your edge of your seat for the entire 2 hours of this film, which is another thing that I want to mention. The pacing is some of the best that I've ever seen. The pacing to The Silence of the Lambs, it makes this film feel like it's 30 minutes long. And you for some reason, I don't want to say you love every second of it. In fact, you hate a lot of scenes in this movie because it is very dark, it is very disturbing, especially the scenes with Buffalo Bill, who, in my opinion, is a much more effective antagonist than any Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, or Michael Myers. Just any serial killer, crazy guy with a knife. No, this guy is really, really frightening. He's truly terrifying in his performance, and Ted Levine does a great job playing this absolute sicko, alright? You don't like him at all, and if I met the actor, I would probably be like, dude, that was really messed up what you did in that movie. But at the same time, that's one of the things that I love so much about film, is I enjoy watching this movie because I can acknowledge the fact that it's so good, but at the same time, it's hard to watch in certain parts, but I think that's just the film doing its job, and there were some critics who had rather strong opinions on that in this film, who I will talk about later, don't worry. So yes, the pacing was very good. As I've been saying, if you haven't figured out that I'm giving this a positive review by now, this is a great film. However, there are people that might be hesitant to watch it because it does deal with serial killers. It does deal with things like abduction, with, underlying themes of cannibalism and skinning people. It's not pleasant at all. In fact, it's very unpleasant. However, go into this expecting a great film, expect tension, expect suspense, and expect great acting and directing, and it delivers on all of those. If you watch this film and decide that's not for me, then that's fine and completely understandable. However, don't say, I don't want to watch it because I dislike the subject matter. Well, almost everyone will dislike that subject matter. It's not a good thing. However, it's a film about serial killers and the minds of serial killers, and how someone, especially like Hannibal Lecter, can be so dangerous, because not everyone has to be this, crazy guy like Buffalo Bill. They're very different in what they do. Buffalo Bill, he abducts people and kills them and skins them. Hannibal Lecter, we don't really know how he kills people because he's in confinement for this entire film. Yet, he's still such a prominent presence. Even though he's locked up the whole time, he still feels like a threat. So, there are certain scenes with him that are uncomfortable because Anthony Hopkins' performance is so effective. But what I'm basically trying to say, watch the movie and make up your own mind. If you decide it's not for you, understandable, totally fine. If you love it, then great. It's a great film, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many others. Speaking of which, Leonard Maltin, let's hear what he has to say. There are so many movies. Okay, there's The Silence of the Hams, which gets the worst rating that can possibly be given. Needless to say, I haven't seen it. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. He gives it 3.5 out of 4 stars, so a very favorable rating. FBI trainee Foster is recruited to attempt to get through to a brilliant psychotic criminal, Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, in the hope that he may help catch a serial killer. Almost unbearably intense, brilliantly acted by Foster and Hopkins, and cannily put together, though the subject material is at times repellent. Based on the Thomas Harris bestseller, the Hannibal character appeared in a previous Harris adaptation, Manhunter. Oscar winner for Best Picture, Actor, Actress, Director, and Adapted Screenplay. Followed 10 years later by Hannibal, and 2 prequels, and then a TV series. So, he liked it. I think that we agree on this one, in that the subject matter is very dark, as he said, sometimes even repellent. Someone might not want to see this movie. I've already given my thoughts to people like that. As he mentioned, it won the 5 biggest Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Actor, Director, Actress, and Screenplay, either adapted or original. This was, as he said, adapted from a novel by Thomas Harris. Thomas Harris wrote 3 books featuring the Hannibal Lecter character, starting with Red Dragon, which was made into a film starring Anthony Hopkins and Ed Norton, directed by Brett Ratner in 2002, The Silence of the Lambs, which we are talking about now, and Hannibal, which came out in 2001, was directed by Ridley Scott and stars Julianne Moore as Clarice Starling. Jodie Foster didn't want to reprise her role, so she was recast with Julianne Moore. Anthony Hopkins returns. It was met with relatively mixed reviews and currently holds 6.7, I believe. Maybe it's a 6.1 on IMDb. Red Dragon has more favorable reviews. I think that's in the low to mid 7s, so not too bad. But they were made out of order, and obviously Silence of the Lambs is the most well-regarded. I actually do plan on reading the books as well as possibly watching the other movies, although I'll probably read the books first because that seems to be what many people consider to be the better version of the story. As I previously mentioned, Hopkins' screen time, I have that on here. I was talking about him earlier, so we don't need to discuss that. Another thing I want to talk about is the Siskel and Ebert review. If you're wondering who that is, then I don't know what you've been doing with yourself and why you claim to know things about movies. Now, Siskel and Ebert were very popular film critics back in the day. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune. I have one of Roger Ebert's books right here in which he reviews a bunch of movies, writes essays on movie stuff, and it's all very good. He is my favorite film critic. I agree with a lot of the stuff he says, and I agree with him on his thoughts on this film. Roger Ebert loved The Silence of the Lambs. He thought it was a great film, deserving of the praise it got. Gene Siskel, however, was not a fan. I typically never agree with Gene Siskel. I don't like much of what he says, or what he said, because he passed away quite a long time ago. Not that that's relevant at all. He said that this film was simple exploitation, taught us nothing new about serial killers, and was basically unnecessary in its depictions of graphic violence. I disagree. For one, the violence is almost never shown on screen. However, the implication of violence is very disturbing and very constant. Oh, that was loud. I'm sorry for that. As for it being an exploitation film, I completely disagree with him there. As I've been saying this whole time, watch it and make up your own mind on it. So that's really all I want to say about them, because I've been going on for quite a while. but make up your own mind. See the movie, watch their review, watch my review. Do it in one of those orders. And I really hope that you enjoy this film, because as for being any good, it is an excellent film. I highly recommend that you see it. Great acting, great direction, based off of what I am assuming to be a great book, because the story is fantastic. Anthony Hopkins gives one of the best cinematic performances in history, and it is absolutely deserving of its placement here on IMDb's top 50 greatest films of all time. As for next week, we will be discussing The Usual Suspects, which, as you might be able to tell, I'm a fan of, because the poster is hanging on my wall. So, that is all for today. I hope that you have enjoyed. If you did, please remember to like the video and maybe even subscribe to my channel. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time. See The Silence of the Lambs. It's good stuff. Quality cinema.